The sound was sharp, unexpected, and chillingly final. A slap. Not just any slap, but one that seemed to ripple through the pressurized cabin at 30,000 feet. For a moment, silence clung to the air like smoke. Every passenger froze, their eyes darting between the two women standing in the aisle. One was Tasha Williams, a seasoned black flight attendant, admired by colleagues for her poise and unshakable composure. The other was Amanda Preston, a visibly pregnant white woman, wealthy by every symbol she wore, and entitled enough to treat the cabin crew as if they were her personal staff. Amanda's cheek glowed red where Tasha's hand had landed. Her eyes widened, not with pain, but with indignation. Her gasp broke the silence. Then came a low murmur from the passengers, a tide of whispers rising into disbelief. Tasha stood frozen. Her palms still tingled from what she had done. In her 12 years of service, she had dealt with screaming children, drunken passengers, and belligerent executives. She had endured slurs, insults, and dismissive comments, but she had never, ever crossed the line. Not until now. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she realized the enormity of her mistake. A flight attendant laying hands on a passenger wasn't just a lapse in judgment, it was a career-ending disaster. And then, as though fate had been waiting for this exact moment to twist the knife, the cockpit door opened. Out stepped the pilot. His captain's uniform was pristine, his jaw square and firm. His eyes swept the cabin, already demanding answers. And when his gaze landed on Amanda, his expression changed, because Amanda wasn't just another passenger. She was his wife, Captain Richard Preston, a man who held not only the controls of the aircraft, but the power to decide Tasha's fate in ways she could barely imagine. In that moment, the power dynamic of the entire flight shifted. Passengers whispered louder now. Some had their phones, others leaned in to watch the unfolding spectacle. For them, it was drama at 30,000 feet. For Tasha, it was life, career, dignity, and maybe even her freedom, on the line. What had begun as another routine flight had spiraled into something else entirely, a clash of race, class, gender, and power. The question now wasn't just whether Tasha would survive this incident professionally, it was whether she would survive it at all. Because Amanda Preston had power, Richard Preston had more, and the system they represented, it had never been kind to women like Tasha. But justice is not always predictable. Sometimes, even the weakest voice can ignite a fire that brings the mighty to their knees. And as Flight 782 soared through the clouds, the stage was set for one of the most shocking confrontations the airline had ever seen. This is not just the story of a slap. It is the story of what happens when dignity collides with entitlement, when silence refuses to remain silence, and when justice and power fight for dominance at 30,000 feet. I worked hard crafting this story for you. If you want more powerful true-to-life stories like this, please consider subscribing. It means a lot. Tasha Williams hadn't stumbled into her career by accident. For her, being a flight attendant wasn't just about serving drinks and managing passengers. It was about representation, about showing up every day in a uniform that said, "I belong here, no matter what anyone thinks." Born and raised in Atlanta, Tasha had grown up in a working-class neighborhood where dreams of travel felt far away. Her mother had been a nurse, her father a postal worker. They taught her the value of resilience, respect, and standing her ground. But they also warned her, the world would not always play fair, especially for a black woman who dared to speak her truth. She carried that lesson into the skies. Over 12 years, she had become a fixture in her airline. Colleagues admired her calm under pressure, her ability to de-escalate fights, to soothe crying children, to maintain dignity even when passengers hurled insults her way. But not everyone loved her. Supervisors sometimes whispered that she was too direct, too assertive. A black woman with authority was often mistaken for being aggressive. Still, she refused to shrink herself just to make others comfortable. And so, when Flight 782 boarded that crisp autumn morning in New York, Tasha walked the aisle with her usual grace. Her smile was polite, her tone professional, her presence steady. She helped a young mother tuck a stroller into the overhead bin. She reassured a nervous first-time flyer. She nodded at businessmen glued to their phones. Then came Amanda Preston. Amanda carried herself like someone who believed rules were written for other people. Her designer bag swung heavily from her shoulder, her diamond rings glistened under the cabin lights, and her voice was sharp enough to cut through the boarding announcements. "This seat is unacceptable," she declared, gesturing at her perfectly fine aisle seat in the premium cabin. "I paid too much money for this. Do something." Tasha's practiced smile held firm. "Ma'am, this is the seat assigned to your ticket. The flight is full, but I'll make sure you're comfortable." Amanda scoffed. "Comfortable? In this? Do you know who I am?" Passengers nearby exchanged uneasy glances. Tasha inhaled slowly. She had seen this before, entitlement dressed up as authority. But Amanda wasn't finished. Throughout the boarding process, she snapped her fingers to get attention. She sighed loudly when others placed bags near her. She muttered about standards slipping. And every time she looked at Tasha, there was something else in her eyes. Not just impatience. Something colder. Something that said, "You don't belong here, serving me." Tasha ignored it, or tried to. By the time the flight reached cruising altitude, the tension had thickened. Amanda made sure of it. She complained about the food, about the temperature, about the speed of service. She made remarks loud enough for other passengers to hear. "You'd think with the money we pay, we wouldn't be bossed around by someone like her." The words cut, subtle to some ears, unmistakable to others. And Tasha? She felt the sting, but she kept her composure. She always did. But storms don't stay contained forever. The confrontation was coming. Everyone on that flight could feel it, even if they didn't yet know how explosive it would be. Have you ever been in a situation where someone tested your patience beyond reason? What did you do? Comment below. I'd love to hear your story. The hum of the engines filled the cabin, steady and low, like a background drumbeat to the drama slowly unfolding. Tasha knew the rhythm of flights well. Takeoff anxiety faded into a lull. Passengers settled into routines, and attendants found a tempo between service and safety. But on Flight 782, there was no peace. Not with Amanda Preston on board. From the moment the seatbelt sign flicked off, Amanda began her performance. She rang the call button repeatedly, not because she needed help, but because she wanted control. A refill of water here, an extra blanket there, complaints about turbulence, even though the air was smooth, demands to move her bag, even though it was properly stored. Each time, Tasha approached with the same calm professionalism. Each time, Amanda responded with the same sharpness, condescension, impatience, and something darker, a disdain that went beyond the uniform and touched the woman wearing it. It came to a head during the meal service. Tasha was rolling the cart down the aisle, smiling at passengers, taking requests. When she reached Amanda, she offered the standard options. Amanda didn't just refuse. She sneered. "Is this really all you people can manage? I paid for a premium ticket, not prison food." Nearby passengers stiffened. Tasha's jaw tightened, but she forced her tone to remain neutral. "These are the options today, ma'am. Would you prefer chicken or pasta?" Amanda leaned closer, her voice dropping, but loud enough for the row behind to hear. "Maybe if you spent less time with attitude and more time doing your job, we'd get some real service around here." The words struck like small darts. To some, it might have sounded like normal rudeness, but Tasha heard what lay beneath. She had heard it her entire life, the coded language, the implied inferiority, the unspoken belief that her presence in this role was an inconvenience. Tasha served the meal without a word, but her hands shook slightly as she gripped the tray. The injustice wasn't just Amanda's insults, it was the silence around them. Passengers exchanged glances, some clearly uncomfortable, but no one spoke up. They didn't want to get involved. They never did. That silence gave Amanda more fuel. She began speaking louder, her remarks aimed not just at Tasha but at anyone who would listen. "Imagine paying thousands of dollars and being treated like this. Standards have dropped. Back in the day, attendants had class. Now, it's like anyone can put on a uniform." The implication was clear. A man across the aisle shifted uneasily, but stayed quiet. A young woman frowned, but looked away. Amanda thrived on that silence. Tasha tried to steady herself. She reminded herself of her training, professionalism above all. But dignity has limits, and Amanda was pressing hers like a finger against a bruise. The breaking point came when Amanda blocked the aisle. She stood up, wobbling slightly with her pregnancy belly, and planted herself in the narrow space. Her designer bag deliberately swung into the way. "You're not going anywhere until you fix this," she said, her chin raised. "Ma'am," Tasha said firmly, "you're creating a safety hazard. Please take your seat." Amanda smirked. "Oh, so now you care about safety? You didn't care about my comfort. You didn't care about my food. You didn't care about anything but your attitude." Her words dripped venom. And then, the final insult came. "You people always think you're so important. Newsflash, you're not. You're just here to serve." The cabin gasped. Even those who had stayed silent before felt the weight of those words. It wasn't subtle anymore. It was open contempt, dressed in entitlement, backed by privilege. Tasha's blood rushed hot in her veins. She could feel her pulse pounding in her temples. 12 years of professionalism, of biting her tongue, of carrying herself with grace, it all collided with that one hateful phrase. And then, she snapped. Her hand moved before her mind caught up. A sharp, stinging sound cracked through the cabin as her palm met Amanda's cheek. The silence that followed was suffocating. Amanda staggered back, her eyes wide, her mouth open in disbelief. Her hand flew to her cheek, red from the blow. Gasps filled the air. A man in row 12 whispered, "Oh my God." A woman clapped her hand over her mouth. Someone else muttered, "She deserved it," but too quietly for Amanda to hear. Tasha froze. The reality of what she had just done crashed over her. A flight attendant striking a passenger, pregnant, no less, was beyond unthinkable. It wasn't just her job at risk. It could mean lawsuits, criminal charges, the destruction of everything she had built. Her stomach dropped, nausea curling in her gut. Amanda, however, wasn't stunned for long. Her shock melted into fury. Her voice, high-pitched and trembling with outrage, cut through the stillness. "You hit me. You assaulted a pregnant woman. Do you know who my husband is?" And then, the door to the cockpit clicked open. Every head turned. Out stepped Captain Richard Preston, his eyes scanning the cabin. His uniform was crisp, his captain's stripes gleaming, his presence commanding immediate attention. When his gaze landed on Amanda, his wife, his expression hardened. "Tasha," he said, his voice low but thunderous, "step away." The entire cabin seemed to lean forward, waiting, breathless. The power balance had shifted. What had been a battle between two women was now a confrontation that reached higher, into hierarchy, authority, and the weight of systemic privilege. Amanda straightened, triumphant. She pointed at Tasha, her voice shrill with satisfaction. "She hit me, Richard. She slapped me in front of everyone. You saw it, everyone saw it." Captain Preston's face darkened, his gaze locked onto Tasha like a hawk circling prey. And in that moment, Tasha understood, this wasn't just about a slap anymore. This was about survival. The air in the cabin felt heavier than before, like oxygen had thinned and every breath carried tension. Passengers shifted uneasily in their seats, whispering, glancing between Amanda's reddened cheek and the captain who now stood like a shadow of authority in the aisle. Tasha's body was rigid, her hands trembling despite her attempt to hold them still at her sides. Her training told her to de-escalate, to retreat, to salvage what could be saved, but her instincts, her human dignity, screamed against the weight pressing down on her. Captain Richard Preston's voice cut through the cabin, low but unyielding. "Step aside, Miss Williams, right now." It wasn't a request, it was a command, sharp enough to slice through her remaining composure. Tasha swallowed hard, her mouth dry. "Captain, please." Amanda interrupted, her voice rising shrill and triumphant. "She hit me, Richard, in front of everyone. I want her fired. No, I want her arrested the second we land. She thinks she can lay a hand on me, on a pregnant woman." Her words rang out like accusations in a courtroom, painting Tasha not as a professional who snapped under provocation, but as a villain in the eyes of dozens of witnesses. Some passengers shifted, clearly uneasy with Amanda's dramatics. A few looked toward Tasha with quiet sympathy, but none spoke up. None dared. Silence was safer than confrontation. The captain's jaw tightened. "Passengers, please remain calm. This situation is under control." His words weren't just for them, they were for Amanda too. But Amanda wasn't interested in calm. She was interested in victory. Tasha forced herself to speak, her voice steady despite the quake in her chest. "Captain Preston, with respect, your wife, my wife." His voice snapped like a whip. "Do you think that gives you the right to put your hands on her?" The words landed like a blow. Tasha felt her face flush hot. She wasn't just being reprimanded, she was being humiliated, diminished, stripped of the authority she once carried in the cabin. Amanda clutched her stomach dramatically, as if the slap had somehow endangered her pregnancy. What kind of airline employs violent women like this? Do you realize the liability? Richard, you cannot let this stand. She could have harmed me. She could have harmed our baby. Passengers gasped softly. The shift was immediate, from annoyance at Amanda's entitlement to concern for her unborn child. The narrative had flipped in her favor with a single manipulative gesture. Tasha's throat tightened. She wanted to scream, to shout the truth, that Amanda had provoked her, belittled her, degraded her, but she knew the optics. A black flight attendant arguing against a crying pregnant white woman with a captain husband? The scales of power were already tilted. The captain stepped closer, his presence towering. "You've compromised the safety and reputation of this airline, Miss Williams. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Tasha opened her mouth, but the words stuck, because the truth was, she did know, she had crossed the line, a line she never thought she'd cross. Her colleagues appeared from the galley, eyes wide, faces pale. One whispered, "Tasha, What happened? But none moved to defend her. Fear tied their hands. Standing against the captain meant risking their own careers. And so, Tasha stood alone. The breaking point wasn't just the slap. It was the isolation. The realization that even those who knew her best, who had seen her professionalism day after day, wouldn't risk stepping forward to shield her. Amanda, sensing her advantage, pressed harder. She turned to the nearest passengers. You all saw it. Tell me you saw it. Tell me you saw her hit me. Some nodded hesitantly, their voices murmuring agreement. Others avoided eye contact, unwilling to be dragged into the storm. Tasha's stomach churned. Each nod, each silence, felt like a stone added to the weight crushing her chest. Amanda turned back to her husband, tears now streaking her cheeks, a performance sharpened by years of privilege. Richard, I don't feel safe with her on this flight. She's dangerous. She's unstable. You have to do something. Her words were a verdict before the trial. The captain's eyes hardened. He signaled to one of the attendants, escort Miss Williams to the rear galley. She is relieved of her duties. The words hit harder than the slap she had delivered minutes earlier. Relieved of her duties. Publicly stripped of authority in front of the passengers she had sworn to serve and protect. Her colleagues hesitated, glancing at her with sympathy, but the captain's glare broke no argument. Two attendants gently guided Tasha down the aisle, past rows of eyes that burned with judgment, curiosity, or pity. Each step felt like a march toward exile. In the galley, hidden from most passengers, Tasha slumped against the counter. Her hands shook uncontrollably. She wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. Instead, a hollow numbness spread through her. This was more than humiliation. This was erasure. Years of loyalty, professionalism, resilience, reduced to a single act, an act provoked by cruelty, but one no one cared to understand. Amanda's voice carried faintly down the aisle, still playing to her audience. I can't believe this airline. I'll sue. I'll make sure everyone knows what happened here. No one disrespects me and gets away with it. Tasha closed her eyes, her breath shallow. The walls of the galley felt too close, the hum of the plane too loud. She had never felt so small. Hours still stretched between them and Atlanta. Hours in which Amanda's version of events would spread like wildfire among passengers, gaining weight with every retelling. Hours in which the captain's authority would loom, his judgment already passed. By the time they landed, Tasha knew, the story would be cemented. A violent attendant to attack a vulnerable passenger. The injustice was complete, and yet, deep in her chest, beneath the fear and the shame, something flickered, a spark of defiance, a whisper of truth, because even though she had crossed the line, she knew the bigger line had been crossed long before, the line of respect, of dignity, of humanity, and she wasn't ready to let that go, not yet. But for now, she sat in silence, the weight of power pressing down, the break in her spirit echoing through the cabin like turbulence no one could see. The plane soared on, carrying with it not just passengers, but a story teetering on the edge of collapse. And Tasha? She was caught in the eye of the storm, waiting for the next strike. The hum of the engines pressed like a drumbeat inside the cabin, but beneath it was another rhythm, quieter, less visible. It was the rhythm of murmurs, of whispered conversations weaving their way through the passengers. The story of what had happened wasn't just Amanda's anymore. It was being shaped, reshaped, carried row to row like wildfire. And not every retelling painted Tasha as the villain. A woman in seat 14C, who had seen Amanda snap her fingers and roll her eyes since boarding, leaned toward her neighbor and muttered, "That woman's been provoking her since the beginning." A man across the aisle nodded. "I heard what she said. It wasn't just rudeness, it was nasty." The tide of opinion, once silenced by fear, began to shift. Meanwhile, in the galley, Tasha sat with her hands folded tightly in her lap, her body still trembling from the confrontation. Every few minutes, her colleagues peeked in, eyes full of pity, but no one dared to speak more than whispers, until one of them did. It was Marisol, the younger attendant, just 3 years into the job. Her voice was soft, careful, but steady. "Tasha, I saw what happened. I know she was targeting you. It wasn't fair." Tasha lifted her eyes, meeting Marisol's. The words were a lifeline, small, but real. Someone had seen, someone knew. "Then why didn't you say anything?" Tasha asked, her voice breaking. Marisol swallowed hard, glancing toward the aisle as if afraid the captain might overhear. Because it's him, Captain Preston. He decides who flies and who doesn't. He could end my career with one bad report." The truth stung, but it was a truth Tasha already knew. Power protected itself. Silence wasn't always agreement, it was survival. Still, that flicker of defiance inside her chest grew. She wasn't as alone as she thought. Back in the cabin, Amanda was still performing. Her hand clutched her cheek as if the sting hadn't faded, her voice pitched high for maximum sympathy. "I've never been treated like this in my life. She humiliated me. I'll see to it this airline pays." Passengers listened, but not all with sympathy. Some crossed their arms, unimpressed by her dramatics. Others whispered their doubts. Phones slipped discreetly into hands. A soft click of a camera shutter. A quiet beep of a recording app starting. Amanda hadn't realized it, but the world had changed. Stories no longer belonged only to those with power. Stories could be captured, shared, and spread with a single upload. And several passengers were already building the counter-narrative. In the cockpit, Captain Preston fumed, his pride as a husband mixed with his authority as a pilot, blinding him to objectivity. He radioed ahead, alerting ground authorities that there had been an assault on a pregnant passenger by a member of the crew. His words carried weight, and his confidence came from years of knowing that when he spoke, the system listened. But back in the cabin, evidence was quietly stacking against him. A young law student in row 18 replayed the audio she'd captured of Amanda's insults. The words "you people" rang clear. A businessman with a strong social media following whispered to his colleague, "If this goes public, it's going to look really bad for them." The power Amanda and Richard thought they wielded so absolutely was beginning to crack. In the galley, Marisol squeezed Tasha's hand. "Listen, whatever happens when we land, you need to tell your side. Don't let them silence you. People will believe you, especially now." Tasha shook her head, her voice heavy. "No one believes women like me, not against people like them." Marisol's grip tightened. "Then let them hear it from more than just you." As if on cue, another attendant slipped in, nervously glancing around before speaking. "Passengers are talking. Some are saying Amanda's been out of line since the start. Someone's recording it. Maybe you won't be alone in this." Hope, fragile, flickering, but alive. Hours passed slowly, every minute heavy with tension, but by the time the captain announced their descent into Atlanta, the balance of the story had already shifted. Amanda believed she was descending into triumph, preparing to meet waiting authorities with righteous fury. Tasha braced for ruin, but deep down, she felt something she hadn't since the slap, a thread of possibility. When the plane touched down, the tension was unbearable. As the doors opened, 2 uniformed security officers waited at the gate. Amanda surged forward, clutching her husband's arm. "That's her. Arrest her now," she cried, pointing dramatically at Tasha. Gasps spread through the passengers again, but before the officers could move, a voice rang out from the cabin. "Wait." It was the young woman from row 14C. She stood, her phone raised. "You should see this first." The screen lit up with a video, Amanda sneering, her voice sharp, the words "you people" echoing clearly. Gasps rippled again, louder this time, but this time they weren't aimed at Tasha, they were aimed at Amanda. Another passenger stood, adding, "I have audio too." She provoked the attendant nonstop. "Everyone here knows it." One by one, passengers began speaking up, not all, but enough. Enough to shift the weight of the moment, enough to challenge the story Amanda had tried to own. The captain's face darkened, his authority slipping with every passing second. Amanda's cheeks burned, her performance faltering under the light of evidence she hadn't expected. Tasha's breath caught. For the first time since the slap, she wasn't invisible, she wasn't alone. The truth was no longer just hers to carry, it was spilling out into the open, undeniable and unstoppable. The officers hesitated, glancing at each other, then at the passengers speaking up. The narrative wasn't clear-cut anymore. It wasn't violent attendant versus pregnant victim. It was complicated. It demanded investigation, not immediate judgment. And for Tasha, that pause was everything. The power had begun to shift. The Atlanta night pressed heavy outside the airport windows, but inside the jet bridge, the storm still raged. The 2 security officers, caught between Amanda's shrill demands and the passengers' mounting evidence, hesitated. Their radios crackled, dispatch waiting for an update. Amanda clutched her stomach and raised her voice so the entire terminal could hear. "She assaulted me, a pregnant woman. Do your jobs and arrest her." Her words were sharp, but her confidence faltered when more passengers stepped forward. The young law student from row 18 held out her phone. "I recorded the whole thing. You can hear the way she spoke to the attendant. She provoked her. She demeaned her. That slap didn't come out of nowhere." The businessman added, "And I've already shared it with my firm's legal team. If you try to bury this, it won't stay buried. The world deserves to know what really happened here." Cameras were everywhere now, passengers holding up phones, news of the confrontation already leaking onto social media. The once private humiliation had transformed into public trial, one Amanda could no longer control. Captain Richard Preston's face burned crimson. His authority, so absolute in the cockpit, slipped through his fingers here. He barked at the officers. "This is not up for debate. That's my wife, and she was assaulted." But the younger officer shook his head slowly. "Captain, with all due respect, this isn't clear-cut. We're going to need to review this evidence." Amanda's eyes widened. "Evidence? You have my word, ma'am," the officer said carefully. "Your word isn't the only one here." The tide had turned. Tasha stood frozen, her breath shallow, her body trembling. She wanted to collapse, to disappear, but something inside her shifted. The silence that had once crushed her was gone. Voices spoke for her now. Truth was no longer hers alone to carry. For the first time, she straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin. When the airline supervisor arrived, a tall woman in a navy blazer, her badge gleaming, Amanda pounced. "Fire her, right now, or I'll have this entire airline in court by tomorrow morning." But the supervisor held up a hand. "We'll be conducting a full investigation. No decisions will be made until all testimonies and recordings are reviewed." Amanda sputtered, disbelief written across her face. She wasn't used to being told no. The supervisor turned to Tasha. "You'll need to come with me and file your report. And Miss Preston, you'll file yours as well." The words were formal, but the message was clear. This wasn't a foregone conclusion. For Amanda, it was the beginning of a loss she hadn't anticipated. For Tasha, it was the first breath of justice. The days that followed were a blur. Tasha was placed on administrative leave while the airline launched its investigation. Headlines erupted across social media. Passenger claims racism on Flight 782. Pregnant woman confrontation goes viral, flight attendant or victim. But as the videos spread, so did the truth. Clips of Amanda sneering, her voice dripping with entitlement, were replayed thousands of times. Comment sections exploded with outrage, not at Tasha, but at Amanda. How can she play the victim after talking like that? Good for the attendant. Enough is enough. This is why a recording is so important. Imagine if no one had proof. Amanda's name trended for all the wrong reasons. Her family's wealth and privilege, once shields, now became targets of scrutiny. Journalists dug into her past, uncovering a history of entitled behavior and complaints filed against her at luxury retailers and resorts. Captain Preston didn't escape unscathed either. His attempt to weaponize his authority as a pilot against a subordinate was dissected by pundits, questioned by airline unions, and condemned by civil rights advocates. For Tasha, it was complicated. She had acted out of anger, yes, but the world could now see the context, the years of professionalism, the moments of provocation, the line Amanda had crossed. When the airline's official statement finally came, it was careful, measured, but clear. While physical altercations are never acceptable in the workplace, our investigation has determined that the flight attendant in question was subjected to repeated verbal abuse and discriminatory remarks. Given the extraordinary circumstances, disciplinary measures will be limited to retraining and counseling. She will retain her position with the airline. Tasha wept when she read it. Relief, gratitude, exhaustion, all at once. Her career had survived. Her dignity, though bruised, remained intact. Weeks later, Amanda and Richard Preston quietly withdrew their legal threats. Amanda, facing public backlash and mounting scrutiny, retreated from the spotlight. Richard, under pressure from his airline, accepted a temporary suspension for failure to maintain professional impartiality. For them, power had slipped. The slap that Amanda had once thought would be her weapon became her undoing. For Tasha, the journey didn't end with survival. It sparked transformation. She became a quiet symbol within the airline industry, an example of what happens when workers stand at the intersection of dignity and oppression. Flight attendants across the country whispered her name with admiration. Unions cited her case as proof that crew members needed stronger protections against abusive passengers. And passengers themselves? Many vowed never again to stay silent when they saw injustice unfold. Tasha returned to the skies months later. When she walked down the aisle of her first flight back, her uniform crisp, her posture steady, passengers smiled at her. Some even recognized her. A woman leaned in as Tasha helped with an overhead bag and whispered, "We saw what happened. We're glad you're still here." Tasha smiled softly, not triumphant, not boastful, just steady. She knew the truth. Justice wasn't always immediate, and it wasn't always perfect, but sometimes, with persistence, evidence, and courage, power could be challenged. And sometimes, dignity wins. 2 years after that flight, a new policy spread across multiple airlines: mandatory recording of in-flight incidents. stronger protections for attendants against harassment, and clearer protocols for handling passenger misconduct. At the press conference announcing the policy, one of the airline union leaders referenced the case that had sparked national conversation. Flight 782 reminded us all of one thing: those who serve the skies deserve dignity too. Tasha didn't attend the press conference. She didn't need to. She was already back where she belonged, walking the aisles, offering kindness where it was received, firmness where it was tested, and carrying herself with the quiet power of someone who had faced the storm and survived. Her story had begun with a slap, but it ended with a shift, a reminder that even in the most unlikely places, justice can find its way. Do you believe Tasha was justified in defending her dignity, even if it meant crossing a line? Or should professionalism always come before pride, no matter the insult? Share your thoughts. I'd love to hear your perspective.